Welcome back to the Spirit, Mind and Soul podcast. Today I feel a little bit of a more light-hearted story. So although we're delving into subjects like alcohol recovery, which maybe doesn't seem so positive, we're talking about bankruptcy and feelings of shame. I think this episode, I don't know if it was just the conversation with Sarita and maybe the energy between us, but it felt like a very uplifting and positive conversation for me. I think because she was talking about one of my really favourite subjects, which is manifestation. I personally believe that we can manifest anything that we want in this world, in this life. And Sarita, obviously, being a manifestation coach, will be talking about how we can do that, how we can address any sort of maybe any negative thoughts or beliefs around reasons why we can't manifest it, because that's the only thing that is stopping us from living a life that we love, is believing that we can. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, I'd love it if you could just take a second to do so. It helps this channel grow and it encourages other guests to come on and share their story. I hope you enjoy this one. Here's Sarita. Hi, Sarita. Thanks so much for joining me on your Thanksgiving Day on the Spirit, Mind and Soul podcast. I appreciate so much that you've come on. I know it's morning for you before you go off and enjoy your special day. But yeah, I'm looking forward to delving into subjects that we haven't really delved into before on this podcast. So I'm really grateful that you're here and sharing your personal story as well, because it's, I guess, a challenging, difficult, but also beautiful journey because of where you are now. So, can we go back to, I guess, corporate life? Because, like me, we were both in the corporate world and then had the transition into, well, I guess it was I don't know, for me, I think it was something of a dark night of the soul and sort of transitioned out of that. But I'll let you take over. So tell us about what Sarita was like, back in the corporate days. What were you like as a person? What was life like for you?
Sure. Thank you, Karen, so much for having me here. This is an amazing start to my day, actually, on Thanksgiving. So I love just connecting and talking. And yes, to answer your question, thanks for me in corporate life. So I did the life that was kind of, I would say, projected onto me. I grew up with a single parent. She was a teacher. And so she really wanted me to have a life where I wouldn't have to, quote unquote, worry about finances and things so much.
Mm,
So she definitely pushed me to do more corporate type work. And so I entered into the corporate world in my, I would say, mid 20s or so, and got into insurance. And I never thought that I would be the person working in an insurance company and working in a corporate environment, working in a cubicle. But something about it really did inspire me because I felt like it was a little bit more fast paced. It really, depending on the company I was working at, I would say the second company I worked at, there was this corporate culture of work hard, play hard. So we would put a lot of effort and energy into the day, and then we would go and do activities with coworkers and things in the evening and on the weekends. Like, it was very much about like being a family environment, which I really did enjoy. And then at the same time, it was interesting how that ended up having a ripple effect on me and my health and my issues and things like that. So as a person in corporate, of course, I feel like there's this drive that we are instilled, and I would even say like a very masculine type of energy, where it's like the go-getter, the pusher, the person that's going after things, being in leadership all the time, and so really honing in on those skills, which are amazing and important. But there was a part of me that was very shut down, the part of me that was more sensitive, that was allowed to be the woman, like really be the more feminine energy that I wanted to be, but I felt
mm,
like I had to show up in these spaces as somebody that was very in their masculine. So going after promotions, going after things, going after the money, going after the
mhm,
bonuses were something that was very instilled in me. And so it did end up having a long-term ripple effect on who I became and the story of why I ended up leaving corporate
mm.
pretty much a couple decades after that.
And were you happy? I mean, I know I mean, I guess you weren't fulfilled in the role that you were doing in your work, but were you fairly happy? I know that it became that you ended up with an addiction, and I know there was a lot of emotional things that we spoke of before, and you mentioned, you know, shame. And when did this start to come through for you? When did this, you know, these feelings that didn't feel so good and the addiction, yeah, I guess what led you into that? Was that something that affected you before, or were you a fairly happy person outside of your work?
Yes, so I was fairly happy outside of my work. I
Mm,
had friends. I'm very much a go-getter to begin with.
mhm,
I'm a act now, kind of think later person, just like, let's do it. And so that type of energy was very assisting and supporting in a corporate environment.
mhm,
So I found ways because I knew that it wasn't my calling, but it was a whispered voice that I just wasn't listening to at the time. And so I found ways in my position to be of service because that's something that I always have appreciated and loved is being of service to people and bringing a more emotional component to things. And so I found in those positions creativity in which I could help people. So with my insurance job, just listening to people, hearing them out, empathizing with their situation, almost sometimes feeling like I was a therapist in a way, like answering questions, answering like emotional things, helping them get back. Like I almost felt like I was coaching them in a way without even realizing that I was coaching them. And then of course, just making connections in my office, making friendships and bonds with people. So I found ways in which to bring in those entities that I felt were really important. I would volunteer for any type of leadership positions. Anytime that I would be able to go and get training outside, I always enjoyed like learning more about things that would support me in my role. So I found ways in which to support myself in that. But I also feel that because of, and reflecting back on this, right? Because I didn't realize this at the time, but I knew that there was this underlying like feeling of unfulfillment.
mhm,
And at the time, I didn't, like I said, I didn't recognize or listen to the voice that was talking to me very quietly. You know, our intuition talks to us. And so instead of taking the time to really go inward and listen and focus and meditate and be quiet, I found that escapism was my easiest route to dealing with the emotions that were coming forth that I didn't really
mm,
understand.
mhm,
And so escapism, the result of that or the manifestation of that was a version of me that decided to depend heavily on alcohol to support me through those emotions that I was not allowing myself to work through at the time.
mhm. And were you functioning well? You know, were you sort of, I guess what I mean, I don't know if you would call it a functioning alcoholic. Would that be right to say? Yeah. So you know you did your role well. You were still seeing friends and family and putting on, you know, I guess the mask that people do. Not that
Yes.
I've had an addiction, but I've had an eating disorder. So I remember that mask that you and no one knew I had it very well. Were you the same? You.
Yes, very much so. Definitely a mask.
Mm,
I would say that the alcohol addiction, or I shouldn't even say dependency, because it felt like it was like, so it wasn't that I was, and you know, anybody that's listening that has a alcohol dependency or any type of dependency issue or addiction
mm,
issue, I'm not trying to separate myself from you in this way,
mhm,
but like I'm trying to explain like where I was. So I didn't get up and drink alcohol at that time, but I was depending on it very heavily for uh, social connections and bonds.
yeah.
It got to the point because it wasn't like this in college and it wasn't like this in my early 20s, but it turned into the point where in order for me to quote unquote have fun or have connections with people or be able to be in a social environment, I felt like I had to have a drink in my hand and be drinking
Mhm,
and be under the influence because it would help me to de-stress. And so I would utilize the excuses and mindset to say to myself, well, I earned this because I've been working really hard. I put a lot of effort and energy during the day, and I deserve to have, like, this drink to help relax me. And then of course, when in the type of environments that I was in with an insurance company, we had a lot of vendors come in and would give us food, and they would take us out to dinner, and they would treat us. And so that was the way in which they would thank us, right? So I would take I would take alcohol and consumption as a way of my value. In other words, so I felt like I was only of value when I was receiving, that gift from people, gifts from a vendor, gift from somebody that was like thanking me. And so it just really played like a lot of psychological, I would say, tricks on me, thinking that my worth and my value was because I was under the influence, or because I'd worked really hard, or because, like, I needed to have it to de-stress
Mhm.
or connect with people. So it's like there was just a lot of different stories going on in my head with this version or identity of me that like needed this to survive.
Yeah. And then what did that lead to? What were the consequences that came from living like this?
Yes. So at the time, and this is something that you and I didn't talk about, but it does lead into like the bankruptcy part of this. But with working a job and feeling like I had to live a more fast paced life, and
Mhm.
having a nice car and having a nice home and things, I ended up getting on payday cycles. So I don't know if this is where you live as well, but here in the United States, it's unfortunately very prevalent. People do live paycheck to paycheck because we're way overspending. And so one of the resources that's available to us is payday loans. So basically, you would, say like, this is the amount of money that I get, and so getting a loan out from your pay a couple, weeks in advance, and so you have to pay it back your actual payday. And
Mhm.
so with that, there were certain parts of my life when I was working that job, working in my corporate environment, where I would have up to 3 payday loans at one time. So you can only imagine when payday actually came, I ended up having to pay out all these loans along with rent, along with like car bill, like all these things, and then I would have nothing left. And so I would just keep going in this cycle. And of course, because of the escapism that I was dealing with, I would turn to alcohol. I would turn to these, like, turn to something to make myself, quote unquote, feel better about myself. So there was a lot of shame to that. And so the result of that is naturally, because of the different um, psychological pressures and mental, like, strain, this is what happens with our body: is it starts to break down. We start to feel the shame in like a more of a physical way. And so what ended up resulting was that I started to have mental breakdowns, and that would turn into panic attacks, anxiety attacks. I don't know if you've ever had anxiety attacks, or anyone listening, but it's not a good feeling. You start getting numbness and pain, like in your most likely in your left arm, and because that's
Mhm.
connected to your heart, so it almost felt like it was like having a heart attack. And all of a sudden, shortened breaths, and it was just very scary. And so I'd have these over and over again. And there was a point when I ended up having to go to the hospital because I was having so many. And because of that, that resulted in my inability to sleep at night, because I was so stressed out that these panic attacks would happen during work, or they would result at night, and then I wouldn't be able to sleep, and then being sleep deprived, then I wouldn't be able to function at work, and then I'd be
Mhm.
terrified that I would lose my job, and then I wouldn't have any money. And so it'd just be this looping cycle of fear and anxiety and frustration, and just not knowing like what was going to happen next. And it was so terrifying to me. So
Mhm.
naturally, physically, I broke down.
Mhm. So how do you even get out of that? I mean, I'm guessing at that point, maybe you couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So what was that? How do you start, pulling yourself out of that and seeing that light at the end of the tunnel? Because it was there and you got there, but I can't imagine there was much hope at that point when you were at that lowest point.
Yes, I felt completely helpless. I felt like there was no way out. I felt like I said, there was a lot of shame because I
Mm.
realized that I myself had gotten myself into this dark hole. And so I turned to, I was introduced to, first of all, I was introduced to essential oils, and then shortly after that to meditation. So that was over a decade ago. And I would say yoga was kind of the first introduction, and then it was the meditation.
Mm.
And so, and then at that time as well, I was learning to take care of my body a little bit better in the form of eating my habits, because I realized that I was just eating in certain ways that wasn't supportive to how I was feeling. And so I was introduced to a more like plant based diet. I was introduced to yoga and meditation. And so I just was ready to try anything that I could to be able to feel better.
Mhm.
Because really, I realized at that time, the short term goal was to be able to actually rest and sleep, because I literally thought that my problems would go away. My problems would go away if I was just able to sleep throughout the night, or if I was just able to have the money that I needed to be able to pay my bills
Mhm.
and live okay. And I feel like this is something that a lot of people struggle with this belief that if only I just had this one thing, then my problems would go away,
Mhm.
right? And so I was very much in this mindset of like, okay, I'm literally willing to try anything to be able to resolve this problem. Like, throw it at me, give it to me, like I'm ready. Just I really want this problem to dissolve and disappear. And so to answer your question, it was literally step by step. And it was throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall, just kind of seeing what stuck, to see what
Mhm.
worked, to see what actually would like give me relief. And so I was really approaching like my self-care, my self-love, and my wellness in a very like band-aid kind of way. So it's just kind of like, okay, I have this huge issue. I'm this like sieve that's like all this like energy, and everything's running all over the place. Like there's really no control. Let me put a band-aid on it like here and there. And maybe
Mhm.
that'll help for just the moment, but then it just, that Band-Aid is just a little Band-Aid. It's going to break, because it was a huge, bigger issue that I didn't realize at that moment, right? I see that reflectively now, but that's what I could do at that time, was just take those little steps to support and help myself in those moments. And of course, like those became those resolutions and modalities and things got bigger and bigger as time passed. But that's what I did at the very, very beginning, was just really take what I could, the knowledge that I had at the time, to be
Mm.
able to just get through those moments.
And when did manifesting start for you then? Was it happening at this point in time? Were you starting to see manifestations, good manifestations coming into your life? How did that come about? Were at the point where you were starting to do it intentionally?
Yes. So I got introduced to the first, which most people get introduced to when it comes to manifesting and manifestation world, spirituality, and all the personal development and all the things, is through the law of attraction.
Mhm.
So, like many people, I got introduced to that through the book The Secret. And then also there was a Netflix show that was on at the time. And I remember watching it. And I remember thinking about it like, think positively, and what you are, you attract, basically. And so, although I understood it conceptually, like in a very conceptual, logical way. And this is the interesting thing about universal energies and higher power, is there is no logic behind it, like
Mm.
not at all, because this is the beauty about being human, is that we are logical um, creatures, which is amazing and beautiful. And we are also experiencing this 3D reality in a human form, right? So I got attracted, or I got introduced to it through the law of attraction. And like I said, I thought about it conceptually, and it was just one of those things that I was like, "Oh, that's nice." And I just kind of stuffed it,
Mhm.
behind and put it like the book on the shelf and like, "Okay, I read it, like whatever. I'll use it,
Yeah.
when I need to." And then it was through doing more meditation. It was through doing my yoga practices, because I would utilize yoga and meditation during those nights that I would be awake for hours and hours at a time because of my insomnia. And it would be so frustrating because I would be like, okay, well, here I am trying to quiet my mind and trying to still my mind so I could have the result of being able to sleep and feeling more relaxed and more peaceful, right? And yes, during the day, I have this mask on that shows that I'm such a Zen person, and I'm like very, in my well-being, and I live near the beach, and but at the same time I'm like having this major panic attack and anxiety attack. So it was this kind of double-edged sword that was going on with me, where people would see me this way, and so they would be attracted to me in that because I would be exuding that, but my inner state was just like panic, panic, all the time. And so through that, I would say that learning more about manifestation, I picked up Gabby Bernstein, and I really resonated with her because she also suffered from addiction, alcohol
Mhm.
addiction and drug addiction. At that time when I picked up the book over a decade ago, I would say about 8 years ago, when I read it, I didn't think, I was in denial. I didn't think like, oh, I have an alcohol problem. I have an alcohol dependency problem.
Mhm.
I'm like, that's her. She has like that, like I was very much separating myself from that. So I would read these books and like learn how to just be more positive and high vibe, which now I know as a manifestation coach, there's way more that goes into it than just that. But at
Mhm.
the time, that's what was supportive to me. And so it was little, like I said, little by little, just flooding my energy, flooding my mind, flooding my being with like more positivity and more knowledge around things that were supportive to me, were ways in which I would just move the needle forward.
Mhm. So then, what I'm intrigued to know, and I'm sure other people watching are, what things were you manifesting into your life? Because we know that we can manifest anything we want, anything that we do desire, we can manifest it. I know that obviously we have, or we may have mindset blocks, or energy blocks, emotional blocks that can, have resistance to those things. But once we do the work on them, we can manifest anything we desire. So what were the things that you started bringing into your life that you felt that you desired?
Yes, at the time. So when this was all happening, this was my early 30s. And one of the things that was the first thing that I manifested that was really, really amazing was I wanted the opportunity to live on my own, have my own place, because I'd always had roommates and I always wanted to live by the beach. I fell in love with San Diego when I moved here 2 decades ago. And one of the communities that I fell in love with the first day I visited, I was like, I want to live here. I need to live here. I'm meant to live here.
Mm-hmm.
And it so occurred that it was really cool how the pieces fell into place. One of the places that one of my friends was living, she told me, hey, I'm going to be moving out. It's a 1 bedroom. If you're interested, you can take over the lease, and then we're going to be moving out. So I manifested this place that was amazing, that I lived on my own. It
Mm-hmm.
was so beautiful. It was in walking distance from the beach, and it was everything that I ever wanted. So it was amazing. So that was one of the first things I manifested. And again, it wasn't like at the time I didn't understand manifestation, but I understood that like things were working for me and things were working um in the best way possible for me when I put positive vibes out there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the first things I manifested, my own place to live. And it was in walking distance from the beach. And it was like a dream come true. And then after that, I was living alone and I was still working my corporate life. And yes, I was going through anxiety. And that's when the anxiety really started kicking in a lot more. That's when things really started, I would say, kind of going downhill in a way. But also, too, I really wanted to manifest a boyfriend. I had been dating and dating people, and just things hadn't worked out. And so finally I said, okay, God, universe, I'm ready. I'm ready for a boyfriend. And before I know it, within like less than 3 months, I manifested a boyfriend whom was somebody I actually already knew. He was a friend of mine. I hadn't seen him like that, but we ended up getting into a relationship, and that relationship was beautiful. And it brought to me the sense of family that I felt like I was not receiving or I didn't have in a way. And it was something that I had said without even realizing it. I had declared it to the universe in my late 20s. I just really want a family. And so, in that relationship dynamic that I had with him for 8 years, I felt like I was part of a family because he was so close to his family and he had 2 kids. And it just was really, really amazing and super beautiful that I was able to have that experience. The other experience that I was able to manifest was also, and still working in the corporate environment, having a supervisor who was on my side, who was supportive of me, who would advocate for me, who was amazing and everything that I ever wanted. Because unfortunately, I'd had the experience where I didn't have supervisors that were on the same page as me or would advocate for me. And so it was something that I'd put out there and I said, I would really, really love to have this. So there was a period of time when I had like all three things and I was feeling really good about my life. And again, it wasn't like I didn't understand manifestation at the time. I didn't understand intentional manifesting, but I knew these things were occurring because I was making them happen and also putting the energy into the universe that I
Mm-hmm.
needed to be able to receive them.
Mm-hmm. Was there a point then, because obviously you're not in corporate anymore, so what was the, what, some that can be a fear, I think, because it's firstly it's a leap into the unknown, because I know that you obviously you wanted, well, you became a manifestation coach, so I'm not sure if that's why you left corporate, you can tell us. But yeah, it's a leap into the unknown, but it's also, it's your, it's like a comfort blanket. It's a safe. It's like what's known as a safe job, isn't it? And going into something, especially, and then being self-employed as well. So yeah, what gave you the confidence to leave and go off and do what you're doing now? Yeah, I guess is my question.
Yes, I didn't have any confidence. So that's interesting you ask it that way. It was a it was a moment that I had that I just said, I need to take the leap now or else I will
Mhm,
not do it. I will
mhm,
not do this. So, that amazing supervisor that I was saying, there were just things in my life that were kind of telling me that it was ready. It was time to leave.
mhm,
And one of them, like I said, was my health. My health and wellness was just not optimal. And then also, the company that I was working at was just struggling with a lot of different things. Like there was um, what's it called? One of the main people there ended up getting let go because of sexual harassment. And then the supervisor that I so dearly admired and loved ended up stepping away, going to another company. So I felt like there was, and again, in my personal life as well, I felt like it was time. I had been in the personal development community at that point for about 4 years. I was into spirituality. I was following influencers. I was following thought leaders at the time. Brendan Burchard was somebody I was like listening to very, very consistently. He's a leadership coach. Now he's been around for the last couple of decades. He's just very inspiring. And so, and I had a lot of friends that were like going into like network marketing and making money and like starting to really like build their businesses and do the things, and like Instagram was just becoming kind of a thing, and it was just like social media was changing, and I was like, something's got to give, something's got to give. And I asked myself, I remember having this conversation with myself in my cubicle one day because my 40th birthday was on the brink. It was coming up in like 6 months, and I was still 39, and I asked myself, Sarita, do you really want to be doing this into your 40s? Like, you see people in this field in their 40s and 50s, and they're just not really happy. Do you really want to be like that?
mm,
And I think it was a larger question than just like, oh, is this a type of job you want to do? It was more like the question of, Do you really want to be giving your power away and be doing the life that was expected of you versus the life that you actually want to consciously create for yourself? Right?
Yeah.
I didn't understand that question at the time, but I see that now. It was
Mm-hmm.
higher power, higher self asking me that. And so courage to actually take the leap of faith. I just did it. I ended
Mm-hmm.
up my little dog passed away. He was like my life, and everything had passed away. And it was almost like the permission slip that I needed. Like, okay, now, because you don't have the responsibility of him, and the kids are older now. My boyfriend at the time, his kids were a little bit older. There wasn't the responsibility and need. I was like, it's time that you can start taking care of yourself. So I just did it. Gave my resignation. Karen, I did not have a second. I had no like plan, literally no plan. Like I was just like, I'm going to figure it out as I go. And that's what happened. I took the
Yeah.
leap of faith. Luckily, I was able to get little side gigs here and there to make ends meet. And I literally, I mean, you'll hear entrepreneurs say this, but you quite literally build the plane as you fly it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did. I literally figured it out as I went. And it was really scary. It was really
Mm-hmm.
scary.
I'm glad you said that actually, because here's me coming in with the question, about finding confidence. But actually, I agree. My journey was the same, and you don't need the confidence. I think you need the faith. Just having faith and just like, I think having that outcome that you want in mind, and just surrendering to how it comes to be. And I've done that in my personal life, and in my career. Similar to you, leaving corporate, taking that leap of faith with no confidence, with no clientele, nothing, just no foundations, literally leaving the known and jumping into the unknown. And it's worked out. And I think it always works out. And even if it doesn't work out the way you thought you wanted, I think it works out the way it's meant to be. Yeah, and I think the word surrender as well, just surrendering to how it all comes to be as well. So yeah, I'm glad that you said that. I think the leap of faith is more important than the confidence, because I also think the confidence comes with each little step that you take, comes more confidence.
Yes. I heard something in a, hello?
Oh, I'm still here.
Oh, I can't
Can you
see
hear
you.
me or see
Sorry.
me?
No, sorry.
Have I
Where did it go?
disappeared?
Oh, there we go.
Okay,
Apologies.
that's all right.
I heard something in a show just last night that I thought was so amazing. And it goes with like the faith is that faith is a choice. It really is. Having the faith to be able to do the next step or believe in the long term is
Mhm.
really, really important. I feel like that's something a lot of us struggle with when it comes to just believing in ourselves, believing in our story, believing in our process, believing in, you know, higher power, believing in like the journey is having the faith. And faith is definitely having a choice. So it's not as much about having maybe confidence in the faith that everything's working out for you and truly, truly believing that and truly having unwavering belief around that, because that's what really supported me through every single step of the way, was knowing that I was doing what I could humanly possible. I was putting in the human footsteps. I was doing what I needed to do, but also believing and trusting that everything was going to fall into place that needed to fall into place. And like I said, as a human, that's like sometimes nice to hear because you read that in books. Like I was saying, I read that in books and I would think that and be like, oh, that's nice. Logically, our mind would be like, yeah, I get it. But then subconsciously, energetically, emotionally, it's really, really challenging to get behind.
Mm. Mhm. But your leap of faith turned out, and it all turned out the way that, well, I guess in a way that's fulfilling for you, in a way that you love your life, you've created your life. How do you now help other people do the same? How does that? Yeah, tell us about your work and how that came to be, you know, that you do this for work now. I guess you wouldn't call it work. But yeah, tell us about that and how you help other people, how they are now manifesting their own realities.
Yes. So, like I was saying, that it really inspired me that I have consciously created the life that I love now, right?
Mm,
Because before it was this societal projection, it was a projection from my mom. It was this belief that I needed to do things a certain way. I feel like especially as women, we are tended to nurtured to be very like pleasing and doing what we're told and not really going outside the lines and not really living necessarily the life that we want to live. I'm sure there's many women out there that are that have believed that they are supposed to be a wife and supposed to be a mother and supposed to live life a certain way. And although that those are beautiful things and amazing things and there's so many women that are doing those things, having those roles, I know that in talking with other people that there's this desire for more. And so there's this belief that like more is wrong and then there's this belief that more is better, right? And
mhm,
so it's really understanding that number 1, if you do want more, it's not a bad thing at all because your desire is very valid and very important. And so as somebody that has live the life that was expected of me and then really taking the time this time around. And I feel like almost like I've had a second chance at life in a way because it was leaving the corporate, it was breaking off that 8-year relationship, it was filing bankruptcy, it was going through alcohol dependency, moving through all those things, all those challenges that allowed me to now construct a life intentionally that I love actually living. And so how that really came about was I've been sharing my journey for the last, I would say, almost 4 years now because it really started during the pandemic in 2020 when number 1 I left my corporate job in 2019 and then 2020 is when the pandemic happened and then I started sharing like kind of things and then I left my relationship which was ginormous. People don't talk about how relationships when we leave them are just so foundationally deconstructing. Like they
mhm,
just, I mean, you literally have to start from anew. And so sharing my journey very authentically on my social media and just saying, like, hey, this is what's happened. This is what I'm going through. These are the things. And people started seeing that I like created my life a certain way. Like I started being able to travel a little bit more and sharing my journey with manifestation and being able to go to different places and experience different things. And so that's when people started reaching out to me and people coming to me and being like, I feel like you know what you're doing. I feel like like you could kind of support me and help me in these things. And so in that, I realized that it was through the using the tools of manifesting and goal setting and being very intentional about how I wanted to see my life and experience my life that's what I realized. That's what I want to help support other people with, especially women, in helping them construct a life that they love living and not feeling so bad about it as well. And being able to utilize the tools of their subconscious and a lot deeper and healing those stories and experiences that they had believing that they couldn't do it or believing that they weren't worth being able to do that, being able to manifest money, being able to manifest love, being able to manifest travel and things like that in
mhm,
order to really fall in love with the life that they have and they love
mhm.
living.
Yeah. And obviously, so that's been a few years now, and it's all going well. Life is amazing. And what are the goals and plans and manifestations for the future for you then?
Yes. So the coaching business itself is actually still pretty brand new with
Mm,
manifestation.
mhm,
It's been about a year or so when I really, really stepped into the manifestation coaching hat. I think there was a lot of resistance for me because I was
mm,
like, who am I to teach about manifestation? Who am I? Because I still had this image or thought of like, this is what a manifestation coach looks like, or this is what a
I
spiritual
know.
coach looks like, or this is what, and I
Yeah.
didn't think that I looked like that, right? Because I was exuded these images on social media of what it was supposed to look like.
Mhm.
And it was very interesting. The moment I declared and I made that decision that I wanted to do that, things have really fallen into place. And it's been really amazing to see how things have transformed. And
Mhm.
so the goal is to consistently have people in my amazing coaching program, the Bliss Method. That's where I help people to heal their relationship with manifestation, right? Because, like I said, we are constantly manifesting. And so the thought from before was that I'm just making the life that I'm living without really thinking about it. And so,
Mhm.
yes, I was manifesting a life that I didn't really necessarily love living. Yes, I was working with the pieces that were thrown at me, but being very intentional about it. So I help women to become more intentional manifestors, which
Mhm.
means intentionally manifesting a life that they love living, right? And
Mhm.
so for me, my long term goal is I would love to take the what I teach in my group coaching, which is all virtual, and eventually turn it into making retreats and being able to travel. So people come and I would bring experts together and have these amazing
Mhm.
retreats in Bali and Central America, like all these places, and
I'm
have
there.
beautiful resources for people to come together. Because I
Mhm.
realize that's one of the things that as we move and navigate into life, because the pandemic really taught us this, that we can still create connection, we can still create
Yeah.
community virtually. And that's what people desire them really at heart's
Mhm.
core
Mhm.
is they want to be able to be in safe spaces and places where they can be themselves authentically and not just in their relationships or not just in their family dynamics, but have more community, more women's circles, more places
Mhm.
in which they can feel a part. And so having that resource just online is amazing. And because we are human and we like to have human interaction, I would love to add that to my offerings is that in the future having
Yeah.
retreats where people can come and just really feel like they are part of a larger thing than just, themselves.
I think it's much needed in the world as well, and more women are gravitating towards those type of connections as well. And I think just to go back to what you said there at the start, because I think I can relate to it, and I think others will. When you said, who am I to be a manifestation coach? And I always think, now I didn't back then because I was the same. It was the same sort of well, I guess self doubt, no belief in my capabilities or the possibilities ahead. But I think now, who are you not to, and who am I not to? And I think for any woman who's thinking, what they would love to manifest, whether it's just in their personal life or their love life or physical, it could be like big grand goals or a different career, and that self doubt can come in and say no, I'm not capable, or that manifestation won't work for me, or who am I to have that or do that or feel that? And I think that's just, for them to consider, who am I not to? Like you've proved. And I think I'm an example as well of just someone who has manifested and taken those leaps. And so for me, it's proof for me that manifestation is not woo woo. It's very much just, I don't know how I would sum it up. Um, but yeah, I think it comes from within, and I'm sure that's something that you help women tap into, that feeling coming from within, and that's how you attract it. And also just having that focus, what we discussed earlier, keeping that desire, that goal in sight, and surrendering to how it comes to be. But yeah, I'm sure as you know, there's lots of ins and outs and blocks that we overcome, and I'm sure that's what you help women overcome so that they can see that their manifestation can come to fruition.
Yes, that's so true. I always say that it's like two things working in tandem together. It's this it's the law of vacuum. I want to throw a little science in here or
Mm,
spirituality in here.
mhm.
It's the law of vacuum. So energy is neither created nor destroyed,
Yeah.
and energy needs a place to go, right? Like
Mm,
it's neither created nor destroyed. And so when it comes to the law of vacuum, it's basically making room, making your capacity available to actually receive that thing. And to be able to do that is releasing things, of course, stories, experiences that no longer
mm,
serve you, like thought
mhm,
things, because really we're retraining our subconscious, we're retraining our
mm,
brain. People talk about blocks and things like that. I don't necessarily like to call them blocks because we are just rewiring our data
mhm,
system
mhm,
because we operate a certain way. And when we start focusing on things that we want to experience, we start creating these new grooves in our like mind and our mentality to understand that things can be possible and we can attract
mm,
things and we can what we focus on expands, like all these things. So it's working in tandem with releasing and letting go, and then also doing the human footsteps, right? Because there's this belief, I think, that's still prevalent out there that you can just sit on your couch and, meditate and I'm going to manifest all this money, right? And although there's lots of people out there that have manifested money overnight, millions overnight and things like that. There's definitely more to that story. There's more to that,
mm,
right? There's
mhm,
more at play that occurs. And so what's happening in tandem is you're releasing, you're creating room, the law of vacuum, creating room to receive the bounty and the abundance. You're doing the human footsteps to be able to do that because the universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it, meet you right where you are, right? And so, and what's also happening is trusting because the universe comes in, God comes in with a how. We're not responsible with the how. We're responsible for the what and the doing part of it, and also believing and
mhm,
trusting and all the things. So, there's a couple things happening at one time that are allowing the manifestation, allowing the creation to actually happen. I mean, nature is such a wonderful example of that. Nature is not, a flower, for example, its job is to grow, right? To come from a seedling, to grow, but the how is not its responsibility. It's the
mm,
sun, it's the rain, it's the nurturing aspect of it that
mhm.
allows it to actually be, and all it really needs to do is be, right? And it has
Yeah,
its job. And that's with us too. We have
yeah,
our little assignment that we do, and then the rest really is left up to,
mhm.
yes, believing and knowing that it's going to work out for us.
Yeah, I love that analogy. It's like a weight lifted when we can understand that we're working together. It's like, have like I keep saying desired goal, but having that outcome in mind, taking the action, getting aligned with it, and for it's well, I use the word surrender as well, but I guess just forgetting
Love
about the
that.
how, it's the same thing, isn't it? So yeah, I think it just sort of lightens the load a little bit, doesn't it? It doesn't make it seem so challenging. And I guess it can take away the resistance as well.
Yes. Yes, definitely. When we are focusing so heavily on the outcome, when we're focusing so heavily on the result, we
Mm,
can get lost in the we can get lost in that.
mm,
And I like to say that as humans, we do this all the time. And believe me, I'm very, very guilty of
mhm,
this. And this is part of my like journey in sharing is that I realized that for so long I was looking outside of myself for verification, outside of myself for completeness, outside of
mm,
myself for the um, uh, the result of that thing that I wanted. Like you were talking about confidence earlier, right?
yeah,
It was like my confidence is somewhere out there, right? Like and
mhm,
my completeness is somewhere out there. But
mhm,
in reality, the thing is it's all within you. You're all complete as is. And I think that's something that I really really wish that I had learned this at the very very beginning of my manifestation journey, my dark night of the soul, as we called it, my whole spiritual journey, my whole personal development journey. I wish somebody had told me at the very, very beginning, like, you literally have everything you need within you right now. Like, you don't need to be looking outside for anything. In your 3D reality, you don't need to, wait for that significant other or that job promotion or, that money or anything to feel complete and whole,
Mhm.
because you are complete and whole just as you are. And really, really standing firm in that belief and understanding that you are worthy and whole just as you are. I believe that now. If someone had told me that and told me to believe that,
Mhm.
it would have been really, really hard for me. But it's been through these experiences that allowed me to really understand, like, okay, yes, I really am complete and whole just as I am.
Mhm. And that confidence is in there as well. It's within us
Mhm.
all. It never
Yes.
goes anywhere. It's just tapping into it and finding it, which sometimes can come once we take those little steps or baby steps into the unknown. And you've got your podcast as well, Back to Here. And do you talk about manifestation on there? Is that somewhere people can go and find out more about manifestation and your journey as well?
Yes, thank you for asking. Yes, my podcast is called Back to Here with Sarita, the new Manifesting Paradigm podcast. Very long,
Mhm.
but the new Manifesting Paradigm podcast, like I said, is about really healing your relationship with manifestation and understanding that you are source, you have sovereignty, you are power. And so, Back to Here is just the reminder to you that back to here, back to center, back to yourself is like really, really important. So, yes, I do talk a lot about manifestation. I cover things like self love, wellness, emotional wellness, and I have guests that come on that talk about their own personal journeys. I definitely talk about my own personal journey and my experience. I'm coming on 2 years on the podcast. Starting in January will be officially 2 years, which is amazing. So there's plenty of episodes to listen to that are everything around self love. There are things about money healing. There's things about manifestation, manifesting, how to manifest certain things into your life. So we cover a lot. I cover a lot of different
Mhm.
things within the podcast. But yes, it's an amazing resource. It's on YouTube if you're more into watching episodes. They are available on YouTube. I'm on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well.
Okay, I'll leave all the links below. And what about anyone who wants to come and chat with you about working with you on any manifestations they might have? How can they do that? Should they contact you on social media?
Yes, the best way to contact me, I'm on all platforms at Sarita Wellness, so my name, and wellness, because I'm all about emotional wellness as well.
Mhm.
And so I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, TikTok, and on YouTube at Sarita Wellness. And yes, by all means, feel free to send me a DM. I'm very much in my DMs. I'm very much into building relationships and community on my social media. So please feel free to send me a DM there. You can also visit my website, saritawellness.com, or you can send me an email at info@saritawellness. I definitely will respond to you. It's me responding to you because
Mhm.
I'm all about creating that connection and relationship with you.
Mhm. So I encourage everyone to go over and check out the podcast and get in touch with you. As you say, it's about community as well. It's not, it's not just about working. I guess it's about building that community and sharing,
Yes.
yeah, and connecting. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, your personal story. And yeah,
Thank
I wish
you.
you all the best for the future and go and enjoy your Thanksgiving now. I appreciate that you joined me on Thanksgiving Day.
Yes, thank you so much, Karen, for having
Mhm.
me on the podcast. It's so amazing to be able to be on the other side of the
Mhm.
microphone, not asking the questions, but actually sharing my story
Mhm.
and having these experiences like I had with you today just helps me and gives me permission to say it's okay to share my story openly and
Mhm.
not be so judgmental to myself with some of the things that I've gone through. Because I know in sharing openly, the struggles that I've had definitely will support other people as well.
Mhm.
And thank you so much again for having me. I really, really appreciate
Yeah.
it.
You're welcome. I appreciate you sharing your journey as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you're feeling inspired after listening to Sarita talk about not only her journey and how she came out the other side, but the manifestation, how we can manifest anything we want into our lives. I hope that gives you the encouragement and empowerment to go off and start thinking about what you'd love to call into your life or what you'd like to create in your reality right now. You can go and listen to Sarita's podcast, which is Back to Here. I'll leave the link for that in the description below. And if you're feeling called to reach out to Sarita, to chat with her, or to work with her, all details on how to do so are also in the description below. If you'd like to see more episodes like this, just hit that like button. It will let me know that you enjoyed this and this is the type of content you'd like to see more of. And I'll see you next time.